Hello, and welcome to the Regrettable Century. It's us, all the dudes, and we are here to talk about why the Luddites were right, actually. This is something that we've mentioned a few times in passing, just having sympathy for the Luddites, and we've actually had some arguments about it in the Discord. I remember at one point someone objected to us sympathizing to anti-technology movements and romantic anti-capitalism by saying Marx wasn't a Luddite.
It's true, he wasn't.
Yeah,
he spoke against it.
Turns out neither were the Luddites.
Yeah.
In a certain sense, yeah.
I mean, that's kind of the point of this, right? It's like, okay, then this term has kind of been in use for a while, and I don't think we know what it means.
Yeah.
I think maybe it's time we make sense of what it means, so that we can then say how it's useful or not useful, and also whether or not we should even still use it.
Yeah, that's I think one of the articles that we read is the author is interested in reclaiming the legacy of the Luddites and saying like it's a term that shouldn't just be like allowed to be used as a pejorative without any kind of discussion. And I've never really used it as a pejorative. Not really. Not in serious conversation. Like to my wife, because she hates all technology that doesn't have to do with cooking, actually. Yeah. She's anti-technology except for like cool rice cookers and stuff.
I've used it as self-description, but I've misused it mostly. I've used it in a way which suggests it means something more than it means.
Yeah.
I frequently use it like in work contexts when talking about my struggling with using some piece of technology, and I'll just describe myself as the biggest Luddite around because I don't know how to use technology, and just like random people, non-political random people, members of the population understand what I mean and there's no miscommunication there.
Right.
Even though in that context I am technically, as we're discussing here today, misusing the term. There's only so much use I think in trying to tilt against windmills and redefine words or whatever. But so I mean, the word means what it means. But I think it's useful to, especially in the context of discussing Marxist ideas and socialist ideas. And workers' movements and the general project of this podcast of re-exploring or reviving those paths not taken in the past of the socialist and workers' movements. I think it's worth delving into and exploring it and talking about what the Luddites actually did and said and believed. And whether that was and evaluate it and talk about the values or where it fits within our own present value systems, especially since it was both a workers' movement, a really existing workers' movement, and was expressly criticized by Marx himself in his writings. So I mean that's something worth delving into. So whether it's quote unquote properly, the term is properly used or not by people generally. I'm perfectly happy to sort of surrender the term to the waves of history, just like Marx and Engels abandoned socialism and said, no, we're actually communists or whatever. And the term social democrat used to be what Marxists were called, and now it means the reformists. It's whatever. Like these words move and change, and it's fine, especially in contested political spaces. And so I think it's fine that Luddite becomes something other than what it initially was. But anyway, it's worth exploring.
So what are Luddites now? Degrowth communists?
No, well, it could be. I think one of the reasons why investigating the actual history, like we all grew up with the pejorative usage of Luddite, and I don't think in a negative sense. like most of the time, it's like Kevin said, where everyone knows what everyone means when they use it in the popular vernacular. It means we have issues with social media. We're not that trained in certain kinds of technology or software, or we have an aversion to learning those things. It could be ideological or just kind of personal, but that's not like bad in and of itself. Lots of people don't like the way social media makes them feel, and that's kind of a positive expression to claim a sort of even a misuse of being a Luddite. But I think it's also important because it links us to the sort of historical waves of what automation has done to labor then and now. Because we're obviously, it's most relevant because people are familiar with it, the misuse of it, and it's happening still.
Well, so I don't know. Maybe in a certain sense, yes. I would maybe qualify that and say that it seems to me anyway that Luddism was a self-conscious political movement at the point of primitive accumulation, at the point of accumulation by dispossession, that has analogous relevance today, but it may not be entirely perfectly transposed from that moment in time to now. And specifically, I would say, and here's me sort of positing a definition of it, and maybe we can explicate more fully what it is, and then move to talk about the our evaluation of it. Is that it was a movement at the very early initial stages of industrialization by skilled artisanal workers affirmatively standing against and actively destroying and threatening people who were engaging in the process of accumulation by dispossession through the use of technology in the workplace for the specific purpose of de-skilling the workforce.
Yep.
So that they could lower wages. That was very explicitly the purpose of it. And the Luddites, one thing that I learned in preparing for this episode was that the Luddites were not opposed to all technology. They embraced technology that they liked and made their lives easier and helped them to accomplish their goals. They pointedly destroyed and opposed the use of technology that was implemented by the owners of capital, of industrial enterprises, factories that were coming into existence that were de-skilling their labor. And putting them out of business through competition in the marketplace by capitalists who were pointedly putting into practice the ideas of Adam Smith and whatnot.
So you're right. It means more than just my mom can't figure out how to change the time on the VCR.
Even though that's true.
No, it was like a conscious political movement that was meant to safeguard the jobs and livelihoods of working people. And I think that you said artisanal workers, and I think that there's like a sort of gray area between artisanal and factory worker that these workers existed in, because they were mostly like workers congregating in workshops. So there would be, groups of them, but in workshops rather than factories.
Right.
So they weren't like individual propertier artisans, like petty bourgeois artisans that owned their own like weaving businesses and stuff like that. They would be still working for a capitalist, but in a workshop of like, of probably 5-10 people as opposed to like 50-100 people in a factory or something like that. So it's this transitionary phenomenon where there's this socialization of labor going on at the same time that the labor must be highly skilled by someone who has done it their entire lifetime.
Right.
Yeah, so it's actually a very interesting sort of phenomenon.
And it's important to situate it in the larger historical context, not only of a burgeoning industrialization, predominantly in the north of England and the Midlands of England, but within the Napoleonic Wars,
Right.
within the ongoing food shortages that come about through naval blockades. I think in Nottinghamshire, which is one of the central, this was kind of like they had regional pockets of what became Luddism break out because the industry was divided by type. So you had the three epicenters were the East Midlands, where there were stocking knitters, West Yorkshire, where there were woolen workers, and Lancashire and Cheshire, where there were cotton workers. And each of them took to machine breaking between 1811 and the peak being 1812, and then 1813, and then there was some revival later of people copycatting. But one of the main reasons why they did machine breaking was because trade unions were illegal as of 1799 and 1800. So they had actually no way of organizing otherwise. And there's also the way that you were saying, Chris, workshops were regionalized. So they didn't have a ton of interaction with one another between workshops, between sites of industry. So organizing a strike would be phenomenally difficult without, the further concentration of the workforce. And this is a way of, Eric Hobsbawm coined a great term, collective bargaining by riot.
Yeah.
So this is what machine breaking, which they didn't do this had been ongoing, right? For as long as the machines had been doing this displacement. But
right, I guess the term Luddite comes from a guy, Ned Ludd, who under the broke the machine of his boss, who was displacing him, and that happened in the 1780s. And the movement of Luddism takes place in like 1812 to 1815. Right, something around there. So it's like, they took inspiration from this folk hero,
right,
who was just a guy that got pissed and broke his boss's stuff.
Right, as an individual.
I think that's beautiful, actually.
That's really, that's
they
exactly
took inspiration from him, but they also invented a folk hero, right?
Right.
Which is their nom de guerre for their movement, Ned Ludd.
Right, that was the super interesting and cool thing that I learned was that they would literally write letters to their bosses,
threatening to kill them,
threatening to kill them, threatening to kill their families, threatening all this stuff, and they would sign it Ned Ludd, so that they would anonymize themselves all behind the name of this this mythologized folk hero leader that they follow or whatever, which is so fucking cool. I love that so much.
What's really cool is that there's there's a history of doing this.
Yeah.
There's Captain Schwing from the 1300s. Wait, I'm getting the years mixed up.
You're Captain thinking Schwing of damn it, what's it called? Never mind.
Schwing.
I can't remember what it is. Yeah, what is that? That's
Schwing. That's
Wayne's World. There you go. You're thinking of Wayne's World. Yeah,
Captain Schwing from Wayne's World. There's also,
we're
Captain
not
Schwing
worthy
for the agricultural workers in the 1830s. So it's a later date.
You're thinking John Ball and Jack Straw from the 1380s, the English Peasants' Revolt as well, right?
Yeah, there's a long tradition of romanticized English folk heroes.
Robin Hood?
Robin Hood's a really great example.
And they reference Robin Hood and the Sherwood Forest in some of their letters to these people. There's like literary flair to these letters.
Yeah. It's funny when I was listening to the historian on the podcast that you sent us, Ben, talk about it, And she's like, "Oh, some of these letters are very disturbing. They're threatening these bosses and their families." And I was just like, "What? Disturbing?"
I know. I was like, I want to read some of these letters. It sounds awesome.
They're available. Yeah, they're in the National Archives.
Yeah,
in the UK.
Well, and so what's interesting is that like this is a hallmark of let's say a more chaotic, more discordant, less organized, whatever response from working people to all sorts of injustices. But it's also it's something that periodically pops up in the present day when it comes to workers being frustrated with their unions. Like I remember in I forget what town this was now. It's in Venezuela when I was there. I talked to the group of workers who like they got possession of their factory by locking their boss in the closet and saying they wouldn't let him out until he signed over the deed to the property. And so he went back to Brazil. Like, yeah, they could have petitioned the government and relied on the courts and whatever, but instead they just said, you know what we should do? This thing which is supposed to be a sign of the things which we don't regard mature workers' movements as doing. It's like, oh, this is just turns out this is just working class culture in every country.
One of the kind of calls for restraint to consigning like greater conspiratorial cohesion to Luddism after the fact is this kind of division between what some historians deem political organization versus industrial. And this one historian that I happen to have a book here on my shelf from, I think, the 70s. It's basically a monograph from this English academic, Malcolm I. Thomas. He's basically disputing the kind of anachronistic or retroactive narrativizing of this as more than it was, which the Luddites did themselves.
Yeah.
They were kind of organized in cells of, say, 10 men, and they had concerted, targeted actions, but they wrote these letters that pretended a much larger movement. And then the authorities, the alarmists among them, took that to heart, and they started kind of telling the government and the military that they perceived it as a real revolutionary movement. But this kind of industrial focus, like Kevin said, they're focused upon particular machines, the ones that de-skill, the ones that lay people off of work, the ones that remove the apprenticeship pathway. They're also, trying to hire people that haven't gone through that to use these new steam-powered and new knitting stocking frames. These were the targets of their destruction. They're perfectly fine to keep using the machines that were invented before that helped them do that skilled labor. So it's not an ideological project in a sort of anti-technology sense, like we were saying. It's highly practical. And these are industrial actions that are not in a concerted conspiracy with parliamentarians. This is a working class movement, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, and I think that the conflating of the Luddite phenomenon with anti-civ sentiment has been very intentional, very deliberate, because it's like what you don't want is this to be popularized and because it's cool. You don't have to try very hard to make it sound cool. It just is cool, and so you want to make it seem like these are people who they don't understand progress. They resist progress. They resist the march of technological progress. And I was like, the thing is, that's already cool enough anyways. But it's cooler now if you know anything about it.
Yeah. I mean, I think that I take a sort of hindsight being 2020 kind of view of technological progress, whereas I definitely understand where Marx was coming from and creating the material abundance necessary to institute socialism. But since socialism didn't get instituted and now the world has been destroyed, I kind of look back at it and go, well, maybe more people should have been Luddites all the time, sort of as a matter of principle.
Well, I think, I think this would be good to maybe explicate Marx's criticism of the Luddites more precisely here, because I think part of his point is this was, the early Marx in particular, who was making these criticisms, and I think that so I think that part of what they were resisting and part of what he was championing was the collectivization, the socialization of the labor, of the productive process, the socialization of labor itself, that he regarded as a necessary precondition for socialism, and hence, while we may have sort of petit bourgeois sympathies for artisanal workers, or with the qualifications that you provided, Chris, we should regard this as a positive development in human history. I think it was important and necessary that there be a space staked out by socialists who recognized and advocated for the progressive dimensions of capitalism. I think also part of what Marx was, the valid point, I guess I would say, that Marx was making here is that he is looking at criticism from the perspective of the already proletarianized masses. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And so he's saying, like, all right, it's here, it's done. Now let's, move society forward. And we must posture ourselves in as advocates of this class position, not as the in the position of the reactionary anti-capitalists who oppose the development of capitalism. Rather, we must posture as in the position of the workers who are already subject to the fully realized industrial capitalist system. And I think that that's an important position to take. And especially in our modern world, where feudal modes of production have been wiped out, it's not really a live question anymore. Whether we should defend small production against industrialization or not. It's already been done. That said, I think a more mature Marx started to have a more sophisticated position on these sorts of questions. And what I'm thinking of specifically is, his letter responding to, I forget who it was that I was asking him, but somebody asked him about, well, what about the Russian communes? Could these be it
was Zasulich.
Yeah. Could the Russian commune be a basis for the development of communism? And apparently Marx went through a few drafts of a letter responding, and his initial draft was like, no, you have to develop the means of production. But then his ultimate letter that he settled on and sent and put his name on was a much more nuanced position on it, saying, well, actually, I do think that the communes could team up with fully industrialized capitalist or socialist nations that have successfully had achieved their revolutions, and develop directly from the peasant commune to into communism more directly, and that could skip past it in a sort of I guess you could say in a sort of Trotskyist combined and uneven development analysis, right? And I think you could take that kind of an analysis and recognize that any worker resistance against exploitation is anywhere, always, and forever is always the position that we ought to take. I think what I would also say is the important distinction to be made is that this Luddism was an example of worker resistance contra what the word has come to mean now. it was very pointedly against specific kinds of technology. It was not against technology qua technology. It was not a Heideggerian critique of technology. Right. It was frankly, a Marxian critique of technology. It was a critique.
It's not like a Ted Kaczynski anti-civ. Yeah.
Different. Exactly. Zerzan. Yeah. It instead was saying technology is a problem insofar as it is insofar as it is wielded by the capitalist to solve the problems that capital deems to be problems with solutions that capital deems to be solutions.
Right. We did a whole episode on this concept called "There's no ethical technological innovation under capitalism."
Oh yeah,
exactly, and that's exactly the point. I think is that I've had discussions with friends about this sort of thing, that the very nature of technological developments is that they're going to have they're developed for one purpose or whatever, but they intrinsically produce all kinds of unintended consequences. Some are negative, some are positive, and I'm thinking of, like, when I was a kid, I learned about how NASA developed new technologies to resolve problems that they were facing in trying to engage in space exploration. But those technologies produced things like the CD and I don't know, other things that we subsequently used for totally different purposes, just to benefit ourselves. Being able to listen to music on CDs was great. That was a positive technological development, in my opinion. But these technologies also have, unintended negative consequences as well. And we can look at the unintended negative consequences of social media and the smartphone that they've had on the world today as very sort of self-evident examples of this. And I think the key defining feature is the fact that under capitalism, technology is developed for the purpose of solving things that capital regards as problems with solutions that capital regards as solutions. And a different social order could and would be able to use technology to solve problems that the proletariat regards as problems with solutions that the proletariat regards as solutions. Now, even still, I think there are interesting Heideggerian critiques of technology that we can and should engage with in a sort of post-class society. But I think the destruction of the planet sort of level of problems that we're facing require us to engage with the benefits of technology to try to address those problems.
Yeah. There's kind of a laissez-faire approach to technology that mirrors that to economy. We have to sort of price can no longer be intervened upon by the state, as it was in years preceding this industrial period. That there was some paternalism from the state, and the sort of laissez-faire theories of Smith were influencing the way that technology should be let loose, on the country.
I do. So I agree with you, Kevin, but I also think, just for the sake of for the listener, I even slightly tend more toward like what we've said in the past about degrowth. It's not just the problem is only capitalism. I do think, and this can be vague even, to the extent that we can scale back and deproletarianize and return to some artisan notions in a lot of ways, I think that we should. I think that life could be better that way. I think that is a deliberate, society-wide, centrally planned project for the proletarian power. But I do not share at all this this notion that like the way that Trotsky writes the Revolution Betrayed, and he says that the answer is, I'm going to butcher this quote, so just whatever. He says something like, the answer to our problems is going to be found in pounds of steel and whatever. It's like, it's about how industrialization is going to end up being the savior of the Russian proletariat. That's not true. I think it's very obviously not true. And it's not just that Trotsky was wrong. I think the left is wrong. Marxists are wrong if they think that. There's more to the world. It's all way more complicated than just who's in power. It also matters what we're doing. Yes, capitalism is like the primary 90%, whatever, but the other 10% is still just that we produce too much. We don't need to be proletarianized. We need to scale back. We need to make things that last. We need to make things that we need. We need to have a lot more free time. We need to have a lot more natural growth as well. But I do think, for simplicity's sake, I would say, yeah, Kevin, you're right.
Well, I mean, so however critical Marx might have been of machine breaking or Luddism, we wouldn't really, I mean, they preceded him by decades. His development of what we term orthodox Marxism, of which there are wooden and sophisticated variants, owes something to an analysis of the very histories he critiques from the Luddites. They proceed as sort of modern socialism, and perhaps we need to be kind of looking backward and forward to a communism that precedes and lives after a full understanding of the market and technology. But I just wanted to read a couple of passages from this book, which I have mixed feelings on. But this is the Malcolm I. Thomas book. He says, machinery was selected for breaking because it was employed in the kind of manufacture that the workmen were anxious to ban, or because it belonged to employers who were allegedly guilty of one of the practices against which the men protested. In an industry where mechanization had prevailed since Elizabethan times, and framesmiths and machine operators were themselves concerned with improvements to existing models, it would have been meaningless to have thought in terms of resistance to machinery as such. And the contemporary commentators betray a total ignorance of the hosiery and lace industries at the time. If the workmen disliked certain machines, it was because of the use to which they were being put, not because they were machines or because they were new. And they were particularly aggrieved by the gig mill and the shearing frame. And these are, as you said, contributing to the de-skilling of labor. He also says, where mechanization was furthest advanced and where the men were at their weakest in terms of organization, because trade unions are illegal. So he's making the point that machine breaking never would have been necessary had unions been legal. Where the mechanization is furthest advanced and where organization is weakest, that's where violence occurred. A contrast which probably suggests that ideas of the power of organized resistance, it probably suggested illusory ideas of the power of organized resistance. But
so those who make peaceful reform impossible make violent revolution inevitable, basically.
Yeah, something like that.
Yep.
Right.
Something like that.
Hey, you know what we didn't do? We didn't go through systematically anyways. We didn't go through Luddites, Luddism. Do we need to? Do we think that's worth
We kind of did.
Well, we could just
kind of sped around it.
We could do a quick schematic. I've got some bullet points here I can just read very quickly.
Sure.
So we've mentioned that you have the different industries in the Midlands of England and in the north. Stocking knitters, those are socks. Everyone wears those before socks are invented. Woolen workers and cotton workers. and they're introducing certain, not all factory owners, not all workshop owners are introducing these new stocking frames and steam-powered looms, which are lowering the wages and de-skilling the workforce. And so in March of 1811, 60 men start breaking in Nottinghamshire these stocking frames. I think 60 were broken in that first outbreak. These start to spread in targeted assaults, and they sort of happen in different regions, but they're not necessarily concerted. Like, they're hearing about it, and as we've said, this is like, there's a tradition of breaking machines in England, but there's kind of like a spiritual solidarity, I suppose, copycatting going on, but it's not like a overall organized assault. I think that's the main thing, because there's a debate about who the Luddites were, like what was the movement. You have these initial targeted actions, but then in certain townships, things get really crazy and the community comes out. And then you also have what we witnessed during protests today. Like, there's a criminal aspect, and people come out and start stealing and destroying things besides machines and going into landlords' homes, and people get killed. So this really makes it complicated to like point the finger, because all of this is called Luddism by the authorities, right? Anyway, this continues, and then in 1812, May 11th, Spencer Perceval, the prime minister recently elected, is assassinated, and they falsely blame a Luddite, and it wasn't a Luddite, but this.
Who was it?
You should look it up, because I don't know. I just learned that from the historian, Spencer Perceval, in 1812.
It's very interesting because it seems as though typically the accounting of history goes like Napoleon is defeated, and then there's the Congress of Vienna, and then after that comes the Industrial Revolution. Any kind of like right beneath the surface, if you look at it, it's like these things are happening. The overlap is way more complex, and actually it's like the rise of the Peterloo Massacre is not the beginning of the workers' movement. It's actually during the Napoleonic era, and it's actually there's this mishmash of political and industrial concerns, and the influence of both privations as a result of the war, and also influence and an inspiration as a result of the political developments across the English Channel. All of history happens this way. It's never so neatly and clearly demarcated as this era is over. Now this era can begin.
Right.
It's maybe quote Marx against Marx. You might say that capital came into the world dripping from head to toe in blood and dirt. This contradictions of these social contradictions come into the world with progress and resistance to it. All contained in the same thing.
Yeah, almost like it's dialectical.
Okay, so I just had the historical note about the guy that did assassinate the prime minister.
Who tell us?
His name was Spencer Perceval, or no, sorry, it's John Bellingham assassinated Spencer Perceval, and he was a merchant who was unjustly imprisoned and lost one of his ships, and he was petitioning the crown for compensation, and they wouldn't give it to him, and he visited the Foreign Office, where a civil servant told him he was at liberty to take whatever measures he thought proper. So the next day he went and purchased two 50 caliber pistols and then shot the prime minister.
Here's what I think is proper.
See, that's the only reason I wanted to include this, is because the Wikipedia article says, like, civil servant tells him to take whatever measures he thought were proper. And then on April 20th, Bellingham purchased two 50 caliber pistols from a gunsmith.
That's so sick. I love that.
They should make a movie out of this.
Honestly, it's really surprising that they haven't.
There's so many interesting things that have happened in history that could be really compelling. Stories that could be told that don't. But anyway.
Yeah, but how is there even time for that? We're trying to tell the 15th chapter of the Avengers narrative.
The third remake of the Fantastic Four, or the fifth reinstallment of retelling of Spider-Man, or whatever the fuck.
We saw Superman last night.
Or the fact that or the remake of Indiana Jones, which to me is the perfect argument for, if not Luddism, then just Kaczynskiism. Like, I no longer like movies.
Yeah.
Movies are over.
Just burn entirety of Hollywood down. Maybe those recent LA fires were good.
Oh my god. Except
they just burned down the wrong part of LA though. They should have burned down
exactly.
Beverly Hills and Studio City.
Well, this is a big aside, but the problem with that is these fucking studios own the intellectual property, the masters of all of these masterpieces of records that have been recorded in the past century, and they're just storing them in these warehouses. Like, it's not just like shitty Hollywood. They own everything else that's good too. So it's kind of like trying to boycott Amazon. Good luck with that.
Yeah.
If you burn down Hollywood, you also burn down like the original film of Casablanca and
or the complete Impulse catalog, all of John Coltrane's masters. Those burned down in one of those fires.
Oh, really?
Owned by Universal in 2008.
Well, maybe the burning of Alexandria, the Library of Alexandria, was worth it.
Oh God,
maybe. There, our cousin's girlfriend's dad was a guitarist who played with Van Halen, and he taught him, quote, according to him, taught him the tapping method of soloing. And there is some evidence for it, and he had tons of original masters of stuff that was being played by them in the 70s, and he kept it in his studio in the back of his house that burned down, and he wasn't insured. Yeah.
Well, how can you even insure that?
You can't.
Well, yeah, but also his house wasn't insured, so he lost literally
really
everything, guitars that he had since the 70s, and amps and all of his masters of stuff that he had recorded. Yeah.
Yeah, that is brutal. That is really brutal.
I hate to hear that.
Terrible.
I guess I kind of feel like it's like the killing of the Romanovs. It's sort of like
good callback.
If it's depending on the context, it might be worth it.
By the way, my friend, shout out to Emmett. After he listened to that, he's a bookseller, and he found a weird alternative history in which the Romanovs all survived and got secreted out of the Soviet Union, and gave it to me for Soberversary birthday.
I think I did see that on social media at some point. Somebody jumping in and being like, the Romanovs actually survived. They got away or something. It's some weird little conspiracy thing. And I was like, what the fuck?
That's the premise of the Anastasia movie.
Exactly.
Oh yeah,
Disney, right?
The Disney movie. I don't remember it. I don't remember that. The only thing I remember about that movie is just the evil, terrible guys coming to kill everyone at the beginning, and then talking bad.
The return of Disney's anti-communism to the fore.
Yeah. Well after the fall of the Soviet Union.
Hey, it's more dangerous than ever, I guess.
Right.
I wanted to. There's a couple other really important bits of context. So after the prime minister is assassinated, and thank you for that wonderful story, Chris.
Oh yeah.
So they come up with the Frame Breaking Act, by which frame breaking is declared a capital crime, punishable by death. There's also an oath-taking, an act outlawing oath-taking as a criminal act, and that's something that a lot of these groups were doing, I guess, to sort of they take oaths to revolt and remain, not snitch on one another and so forth, and that was punishable by death. And ultimately, in
bad day to be a Freemason.
For sure. Ultimately, they and also, this is very important. So we're in the middle of the war with France, and there is actually no police force at this time. So if the authorities, the magistrates, want to, the only way to suppress the workers is by calling in the military, which they're in short supply of because there's a war on. But in order to do that, they have to declare the Riot Act. And so this is like
read the Riot Act.
You have to read the Riot Act.
That's where that saying comes from. Yeah, somebody has to get out there literally in the middle of the riot, unroll a piece of paper, and then read it out loud so that the civil authorities can start like killing civilians.
Yeah. But meanwhile, they're like
it's way less sophisticated. Now they could just do it without reading it.
Yep.
Meanwhile, they're kind of in short supply of soldiers on the front, so it's kind of it sounds like a stressful time for the magistrates.
Poor magistrates.
And so ultimately this year, they round up who are supposedly, quote unquote, the leaders. They're arrested, tried, and executed. 14, I believe, in Nottinghamshire, 8 in another locale, and then several are sent packing to Australia, the country of convicts.
Yeah, it's interesting that I guess one of the historians points out that it's interesting to see how many people they actually killed, how many Luddites were killed for their actions, when the main thing that they were doing to prisoners and people who broke the law, people who were troublemakers, was just deporting them to Australia. Mm-hmm. It just really goes to underscore how much of a threat the British government thought the Luddites were.
Yeah.
They thought that they were in the middle of the second French Revolution, like a French Revolution style situation happening in Britain.
Right.
Yeah, it's kind of like how in the 1926 general strike, they thought that the Bolshevik Revolution come home. And I think that we should take the authorities more seriously. Say, that the people who like the capitalists hate the Luddites. So maybe we should like the Luddites more.
Yeah. What was Eugene Debs' speech about I am a Bolshevik?
Yeah, from the crown of my head to the soles of my feet.
I am a Luddite.
Yep.
I am a Luddite from the crown of my head to the soles of my feet.
That could be the end of the episode.
Well, another thing that is familiar to us now is that after these actions started to spread, they were actually spies and agent provocateurs who were kind of rallying the workers, leading them into traps. And I think in a couple of instances, it was like one of the worst moments of violence that spilled beyond sabotage.
I mean, it would make sense that the worst expressions of violence are all provoked by, nominally by the defenders of law and order.
Yeah.
That's usually what happens.
Exactly.
I do think it's probably worth us talking about more than just, at least briefly, just like, is there the room for Luddism today when it comes to like automation and AI and whatever?
Oh yeah, that's yeah.
Well, did you guys happen to
the book by it's called Breaking Things at Work by Gavin Mueller.
Yeah.
The Luddites were right about why you hate your job, and he says that Luddism, which is to say like a deliberate tampering with and destruction of the things which that threaten our livelihoods today, is probably still something that needs to be utilized. This actually should be a part of the way in which we respond to the quickly rushing forward, the ways in which modern technology is disrupting life in the very same kind of way that industrial technology did a few centuries ago. Like when it comes to AI, when it comes to automation. Yes, we need to rethink the social contract. We do need to have political, philosophical discussions about these things. We do need to know how to respond and to regulate and so on. But I don't think we should tell people that's all we should do. I don't think we should wait.
Well, the
Well,
stakes are
I
much
think we should-
broader and much higher now, I think.
Yeah.
This is a call to everyone to take a water hose into a server farm and just get busy.
Watch where you're standing, though.
Yeah.
Well, like a super soaker. But yeah.
Well, I was going to ask you guys, did you happen to listen or watch the recent interview on Joe Rogan of Bernie Sanders?
No.
I caught up
No.
on that. I heard about it and listened to it over the last few days. And I rarely listen to Rogan, but I was really. They have an extended conversation about the crisis of automation, and like it's like one of the more lucid, for the most part, conversations on the topic I've heard lately, where they're just like, the whole world is heading over this cliff as far as like what this will mean for life when everyone loses their however good or shitty job, and like what's the meaning of life, basically. I was just I recommend listening to that part of it anyway, and a lot of the same issues are still, that we're reading about in this history are facing pretty much everyone. I mean, blue collar, white collar, truck driver, like this
Authors.
yeah, this insecurity is,
Yeah.
it's so much more vast than anything in history. Like, we're not just talking about the de-skilling of labor, we're talking about like the de-laboring of labor,
Right.
I don't know, man. I think the whole AI. We're totally devolving from the Luddism conversation, but I think the whole AI panic and panic slash positive heraldry of it is. I think it's all just like wildly overblown. This quote unquote AI shit is not. It's not artificial intelligence. It's a couple of hamsters in a wheel. It's total garbage.
right now.
When it comes to like when people like Peter Thiel talk about how hopefully we can do away with the labor as a concept and the human beings will no longer be necessary to work to make things, he might be wrong. But when it comes to what the socially disruptive effects of trying to enact that future, I think we are already seeing that.
And you're right, Kevin. I'm not saying. I mean, that's what the terms you're throwing out are instances of branding, rebranding the same thing. I'm not saying we have actual AI, intelligence like the movie or something. But what we do have already can and is displacing large portions of the labor force and will continue to do so.
I think it's a lot like pretty much any other like technological advancement, if you could even fucking call it that, comes in with like a big capital uses it to scare. It's more ideological than it is actually functional. Notice how when a bunch of cashiers were displaced by self-checkout lanes, they still had to have people. They still have to employ human beings to stand there and like run around and fix the machine whenever it breaks everywhere you look, and every 5 seconds it's not working right and whatever. They still
You
have
never get anyone to help you because they're always helping someone else fix the fucking fucked up machine, right?
Exactly, and you're standing there scanning all of the things that you're buying instead of the cashier who used to do that, get paid to do that for you, and all this different stuff. I think AI is performing a very similar function where there are some bits of labor that are sort of automated or made more efficient so that you need less human labor to be able to function it, but to be able to function. But it's frankly, it's being used more to ideologically discipline the workforce to feel like you should be frightened of losing your job. You should accept lower wages and more precarity. Otherwise, you are going to get displaced, when they actually don't have the technology to actually fully displace them. This AI bullshit it's garbage. And I can tell you, as somebody who uses AI, who has, I'm an attorney, and I do have to do legal research and legal writing, and I'm surrounded by, one of the partners at my firm is constantly pushing about, like, hey, use AI to make your, research and writing faster and better. And I can tell you, I have used it. I have used the Westlaw AI, that is only drawing on official legal sources, and it's programmed and designed by, Westlaw, the premier legal research engine that exists out there, and it's only using its own resources to draw from. So it's not like ChatGPT that's like, drawing on sources across the entire internet or something like that. And I will ask it a question, and it will pop out with stuff that is flatly wrong. It is just completely wrong. It is not correct. It is not what actually is there.
The real question is whether or not is it like Ruck? Is it Mecha Hitler?
It has not yet come back saying that we need to name the Jew or whatever.
So one of the ways that we catch people using AI for their essays, at the university level, is by checking their quotes, because AI just doesn't look for quotes; it just makes them up.
Yeah.
And they'll sound plausible, but as a person who's familiar with the material, like I would, one of the classes, the kids had to read these novels that were historical novels based on the subject that we were studying, and I read the novels too. And when I saw the quotes from the novels, in a few instances, I was just like, dude, they didn't fucking say that, did they? So I did a Control F search of the text in the novel to find it, and we can regularly catch students using AI, like ChatGPT or whatever, to write their essays for them, because it makes up fake bullshit, and it'll make up fake historical events as well. So yeah.
Well, right.
It's bad. It's really stupid.
Here's an attempt to kind of redirect this this digression back into the main discussion. Since artificial intelligence and automation are being used to intellectually, psychologically discipline a already heavily, extremely precarious workforce, and since it's having a social disruption, it's having the effect of social disruption on par with anything like the early stages of industrialization. It doesn't really so much matter whether or not there is the possibility of replacing human labor. It still should be treated as an existential threat because of what they're trying to do, which is to either replace human labor or else just discipline human labor. And in either case, we don't want that. And so just like how the fucking tech barons who have hopes for colonizing some, Alpha Centauri and using AI to automate
Isn't that a star?
Yeah, it doesn't matter. I'm just colonizing somewhere far away. Something like Mars.
Is it a star?
I don't know.
Okay,
star system.
I don't know. But
that's the star system that assassinated the prime minister back in 1812.
Right. So, just like how they're trying to use AI to replace human labor, so we should treat it as though they're trying to do so. Anyways,
right.
We should also take similar inspiration from the movements of human resistance to machinery de-skilling and displacing us from our rightful places at the top of the heap, where skills of an artisan, whether you're a shoemaker or you're making rocking chairs, or else you design video games or you write movie scripts or whatever it might be. Technology is worse at doing all the things that makes life beautiful, and so we should take a page out of the book of we should take an inspiration from the Luddites, and we should say destroy the machines,
burn down the AI servers. Hell yeah.
We should take a page out of the book Butlerian Jihad. by Brian Herbert.
I don't think I know what that is.
Oh, it's a Dune novel
Dune.
where they destroy the thinking machines in the galaxy. They just like kill all computers.
Yeah, it's an event in the world history of the Dune world universe that was like 10,000 years before the events of the Dune novel.
Yeah.
Where they undertook the Butlerian Jihad. It's sort of like imagine like Skynet and like Terminator and Skynet or whatever that like happened, and then the humans won and destroyed all thinking machines, and then banned all thinking machines from. It's like nobody's ever allowed anywhere to develop or create or use thinking machines, and so humanity just develops in a different way.
Yeah, and that's why they use like
that's then we should do that then. Yes, you're
wizards that are high on drugs to navigate the star systems instead of like
shamanism as an alternative technology.
There we go.
They turn humans into sort of computers called mentats.
Yeah, we should use shamanism and all other types of wizardry, mysticism instead of computers.
I agree. Butlerian Jihad now. Yeah, hell yeah. I completely agree with that.
Is that the end? That line? Is that the end of the episode?
Рабочие и крестьяне не смогут прожить без нас некому будет установить порядок, определить работу, тянуть труду. Без нас все развалится и государство распадется.